The woman at the check-in counter smiled at me with that particular kind of professional warmth that comes from years of customer service training. I handed her my passport, already pulling up my boarding pass on my phone out of habit, even though I knew everything was in order. It always was. She scanned my passport, tapped something on her screen, then paused. Her eyes flicked up to me, then back down, and I saw the moment her expression shifted from routine to impressed. "Ms. Sterling," she said, and there was a new note in her voice now, the kind reserved for people in first class. "I see you have multiple corporate accounts linked to your traveler profile. Archway Capital, Clearbridge Advisory, and Sterling Family Office." She looked up at me again, curious but polite. "Which family entity is covering today's flight?" I kept my face neutral, even though something inside me wanted to laugh. Or cry, I wasn't sure which. "Sterling," I said simply, "that's mine." She nodded, made a note, and then did that thing gate agents do when they're about to make your day. "Wonderful. I've gone ahead and added lounge access for you. The Centurion Lounge is on Concourse B, and boarding for your flight begins in about 90 minutes. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" I thanked her, took my passport back, and walked toward security with my carry-on rolling smoothly behind me. The bag itself probably cost more than my first car. The watch on my wrist definitely did. "Which family entity is covering your flight?" 5 years ago, my mother stood in her kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd eaten breakfast every morning for 18 years, and told me I would never survive without them. She said it with absolute certainty, the way you'd tell someone the sky is blue or water is wet. A fundamental truth she believed down to her bones. "You'll come crawling back," she'd said. "You'll see." I cleared security, slipped my laptop back into my bag, put my shoes back on. Everything I owned fit into one carry-on and one personal item because I traveled light these days. Light and often. Denver today for a keynote speech. Singapore next month for a consulting contract. London after that. I walked past a family near the gate, clustered around the economy check-in desk, clearly arguing about baggage fees. The mother was saying something sharp to the father, who was pulling out a credit card with visible reluctance. 2 kids stood nearby looking embarrassed, trying to pretend they weren't with their parents. I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself once. The Centurion Lounge was quiet, all soft lighting and leather chairs, and the gentle clink of glassware. I found a seat near the window overlooking the tarmac, ordered a glass of Pinot Grigio from the attendant, and opened my laptop. A stranger just asked me which of my family offices was paying for my ticket. My family offices. Plural. I took a sip of wine and let myself sit with that for a moment. Not gloating, just observing. The same way you might observe that you're no longer afraid of the dark, or that a scar has finally faded to nothing. This was my life now. This strange, surreal, hard-won life where I had built something so substantial that airline systems recognized it. Where I had not 1 but 3 business entities attached to my name, my passport, my identity in the world. Where the girl my mother threw away had become someone gate agents smiled at differently. I thought about that question again. Which family? The one that disowned me wouldn't have paid for a bus ticket. The one I built paid for everything. The lounge was filling up slowly. Business travelers mostly. A few couples who looked like they were starting vacations. I watched a woman about my age settle into a chair across from me, already on her phone, already working. She had that look I recognized now, the one I saw in the mirror, tired but determined, building something. I wondered if she had a family who was proud of her, or if she was doing it alone too. My phone buzzed. I glanced down, saw the calendar reminder. Keynote speech tomorrow at 2. Women's Investment Summit. $25,000 speaking fee, plus travel, plus the consulting contracts that would probably come from it. 3 years ago, I would have paid them to let me speak. Now they were paying me. Now strangers asked which family I was flying in first. I closed my eyes for just a second, let myself feel it. Not triumph exactly. Something quieter than that. Something that felt like finally being able to breathe. The keynote wasn't until tomorrow afternoon, which meant I had tonight to prepare, to settle into my hotel room, to run through my slides one more time even though I'd already practiced the speech until I could give it in my sleep. I was giving the closing keynote at a summit for women in finance and investment, and my consultancy was one of the primary sponsors. My face was on the program, my company logo on the banner. I ordered another glass of wine and opened my presentation file, skimming through slides I'd already memorized. The title stared back at me from the screen: Building Sustainable Wealth Infrastructure, from Consultation to Equity. It was a good talk, practical, full of the kind of information I wished someone had told me when I was 25 and drowning in student loans and family dysfunction, brilliant with numbers, but convinced I'd never be anything because the people who were supposed to love me most said so. My phone rang, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, my assistant Jennifer texted me. VM from someone named David, says he's your brother. Forwarded to your voicemail per protocol. Want me to block the number? I stared at that message for longer than I should have. David. I hadn't heard his voice in almost 5 years. Hadn't seen him in the same amount of time. The last time we were in a room together, he stood silent while our mother told me I was no longer part of the family, and I walked out into the cold November night with nothing but my purse and my car keys and the absolute certainty that I would rather be alone forever than spend one more minute begging for scraps of respect from people who had none to give. I opened the voicemail, put my phone to my ear. His voice was exactly the same. A little uncertain, a little awkward, the way he always sounded when he was uncomfortable. Emma, it's David. I know it's been a while. Mom said I should try to reach you. We need to talk. It's about the firm. I'm not sure if you've heard, but things have been difficult lately, and we could really use your expertise. Maybe we could grab coffee or something when you're in town. Anyway, call me back, please. I deleted it. Jennifer's text was still waiting. Want me to block the number? I typed back, yes, please. 3 dots appeared immediately as she typed. Done. Enjoy Denver. I set my phone face down on the table and went back to my slides. The firm. He meant the family accounting business, the one our father started and David took over, the one I spent months of my life building systems for when I was 26 and still stupid enough to think that working for free for family would finally make them see me as valuable. The one David presented all my work for as his own accomplishment. The one that, when I gently corrected the record at a family dinner, got me accused of being jealous and dramatic and attention-seeking. We could really use your expertise. I took another sip of wine and felt absolutely nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even curiosity. Just a vast, peaceful indifference. 5 years ago, I would have called back immediately. Would have rearranged my schedule, canceled plans, driven across town in a panic because family needed me, and maybe this time, if I just proved myself useful enough, they would finally love me the way I loved them. Now I knew better. Now I had an assistant whose entire job included making sure my boundaries stayed intact. Now I was flying first class to give a speech people were paying $25,000 to hear, and my biggest problem was deciding whether to order the salmon or the steak when the flight attendant came around with dinner menus. I pulled up my photo gallery, scrolled back a few weeks to the picture Lena had taken at our last quarterly review. Me, Lena, Marcus, my COO, and Sam, my business partner, all of us in the conference room with the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out behind us, laughing at something I couldn't even remember now. That was my family. The people who showed up. The people who invested in me, challenged me, celebrated me, pushed me to grow. Blood was just biology. I'd learned that the hard way. I was 7 the first time I realized I was different from my brother. Not different like boy and girl different. Different like I was fundamentally unacceptable in some way I couldn't name or fix. David had just brought home a report card with 3 BS and 2 CS. My mother hung it on the refrigerator with a magnet and told him how proud she was that he was trying his best. I had brought home straight as the same day. My mother glanced at my report card and said, "Well, School has always been easy for you, and left it on the counter. I remember standing there, 7 years old, trying to understand the math of it, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. That was the beginning. By the time I was in middle school, the dynamic was set in stone. David was the golden child. Warm, easy, charming in that careless way that came from never having to work for approval. He was average at everything and praised for all of it. I was exceptional at most things and resented for it. My mother, Patricia, ran our family the way a CEO runs a company, if that CEO's primary metric for success was appearances. The right house in the right neighborhood. The right church, the right friends, the right activities. Everything was about image, about what people would think, about maintaining the fiction that we were a normal, happy, functional family. David fit into that fiction easily. He didn't ask questions. He didn't rock the boat. He smiled in photos and did what he was told, and that was enough. I asked why. I asked why constantly. Why do we have to go to this church when I don't believe any of it? Why can't I take the scholarship to the science program when it's fully funded? Why does David get to quit piano after 2 months when you made me stick with it for 4 years? Why are you telling Aunt Carol we're doing great when Dad just got passed over for promotion again and you've been crying about money for 3 weeks straight? My mother hated every single question. By high school, I'd learned to stay quiet, but the damage was done. I was already written as the difficult one. The one who thought she was smarter than everyone else. The one who couldn't just be grateful and pleasant and easy. I got a full academic scholarship to state. Finance and economics, deans list every semester, internships at firms that recruited nationally. I thought maybe this would be the thing that finally made my mother proud. She barely acknowledged it. Well, it's not like we could have afforded to send you anyway, she said when I showed her the acceptance letter. David went to community college for 2 years and then dropped out. My parents paid for all of it and never once mentioned the money. I came home summers to work internships in the city, stayed in my childhood bedroom with its faded purple walls and the bookshelf still full of high school textbooks. I'd hear my mother on the phone with her friends, talking about David, how he was figuring out his path, how she wasn't worried because he had such a good heart. She never mentioned me. I told myself it didn't matter. I was building a future. I was going to graduate and get a real job and make something of myself, and then maybe they'd see. Our father, Richard, ran a small accounting practice out of an office he rented in a strip mall. Mostly individuals, a few very small businesses. He was good at the work but terrible at the business side. Disorganized, old-fashioned, resistant to technology. When I was 23, fresh out of college, and working my first real job at a consultancy downtown, my mother announced at Sunday dinner that David was going to take over the practice. Dad was talking about semi-retiring, and David needed a career, and it was perfect because it would keep the business in the family. David had no training, no degree, no experience. But he was the son, and that was all that mattered. I kept my mouth shut. It wasn't my business. But then David started calling me, asking questions. How do you use Excel? What's a ledger? Can you explain what accounts receivable means? And because I was still trying, still hopping, still convinced that if I could just be useful enough, I started helping. It became my second job. Nights and weekends, I'd drive to the strip mall office and teach David the absolute basics of bookkeeping. I built them a client database because everything was still on paper. I automated their invoicing. I created a marketing plan to bring in younger clients. I did it all for free. I did it because they were family, and you help family. I did it because some part of me still believed that if I just gave enough, tried hard enough, proved myself valuable enough, they would finally love me the way I needed to be loved. I was so stupid. It took me 6 months to build those systems. 6 months of my free time, my expertise, my labor. And then David invited a potential investor to Sunday dinner. Someone with money who was looking to invest in small local businesses. This was David's big chance to secure capital, expand the firm, prove himself. At dinner, in front of everyone, David walked the investor through his vision for modernizing the practice. He showed him printouts of the database I built, explained the automated systems I'd created, presented the marketing plan I'd written. He never said my name once. I sat there, silent, while my brother took credit for 6 months of my work. And I told myself it was fine. I didn't need credit. I just wanted the family business to succeed. But then the investor asked a technical question, something about the database infrastructure, and David stumbled. He didn't know. He'd never known. I'd built it. He'd just learned to use it. And I couldn't stop myself. The backend is SQL, I said quietly. I built it modular so it's scalable if the client base grows. The investor looked at me, interested. You built this. I helped, I said, trying to be generous, trying not to make David look bad. David's face went red. My mother's went hard. Emma always needs to be the center of attention, Patricia said, her voice sweet and poisonous. David has been working so hard on this, and she just can't let him have his moment. I stared at her. I just answered his question. You're trying to take credit for your brother's work, she said. Honestly, Emma, this jealousy is unbecoming. It's been going on since you were children. The investor looked uncomfortable. My father looked at his plate. David said nothing. I'm not jealous, I said, and my voice was shaking now. I spent 6 months building those systems. I'm not trying to take anything from David. I just want credit for my own work. The table went silent. My mother stood up. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was perfectly controlled. If you can't be part of this family without causing drama, she said, maybe you shouldn't be part of it at all. I waited for someone to say something. My father, David, anyone. No one did. I stood up, picked up my purse, and said, Okay, I won't be. I walked out of that house, and I never went back. My mother called after me, her voice ringing across the driveway as I unlocked my car. You'll never survive without us, Emma. You'll come crawling back. I didn't answer. I got in my car, drove back to my apartment, and sat on my couch in the dark for 3 hours, waiting to cry. The tears never came. Just a cold, clear certainty settling into my bones like frost. I was done. The first week after I left, I waited for someone to call and apologize. Not my mother, I wasn't delusional, but maybe my father. Maybe David, who had at least had the grace to look uncomfortable when I corrected the record about my own work. No one called. The second week, I told myself they were giving me space to cool off. That someone would reach out soon, and we'd have an actual conversation, a real one, where I could explain that I wasn't trying to steal David's thunder. I just wanted the bare minimum of acknowledgement. No one called. By the third week, I started checking my phone compulsively. Not because I wanted to talk to them, but because the silence was so loud I couldn't think around it. Surely someone would break. Surely this couldn't be it. One argument at one dinner and a lifetime of family just gone. But it was. Week 4, I drove past their house on my way home from work. I didn't plan it. I just took a turn without thinking, and suddenly I was on their street. The lights were on, cars in the driveway, life continuing on like I'd never existed. I kept driving. Week 6, my mother's birthday came and went. I'd never missed it before. Even in college, even during internships, I'd always called, always sent a card. This year, I did nothing. I waited to see if anyone would notice, would say something, would acknowledge the absence. Silence. Week 8, I saw on Facebook that David had been made an official partner in the firm. My father posted about it, proud, beaming. 3 paragraphs about his son carrying on the family legacy. I wasn't mentioned. Not even as the difficult daughter who'd stormed off. Just erased completely, like I'd never been there at all. That was when I finally cried. Not because I missed them, but because I was grieving something I'd never actually had. I was mourning the family I'd needed them to be, the parents who would have been proud of my scholarship, the brother who would have said, Emma built this, instead of taking credit, the mother who would have loved me for who I was instead of resenting me for not being someone else. I grieved for the version of myself who'd kept trying, kept hopping, kept breaking herself into smaller and smaller pieces trying to fit into a space that was never meant to hold her. And then I stopped. I stopped checking Facebook, stopped driving past the house, stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I started therapy, found a woman named Dr. Chen who specialized in family estrangement and narcissistic dynamics. Spent 50 minutes every Thursday evening sitting on a cream-colored couch, finally saying out loud all the things I'd never been allowed to say at my mother's dinner table. Dr. Chen was the first person who ever told me that nothing I did would have been enough. "You're trying to earn something that was never available to you," she said one session, maybe 3 months in. "You can't win a game when the other players keep changing the rules to make sure you lose." I cried in her office more than I cried anywhere else. Big, ugly, heaving sobs that came from somewhere so deep I didn't know I had that much grief inside me. But slowly, something else came too. Clarity. And underneath the clarity, something that felt almost like relief. I started working longer hours, 70, 80 hours a week sometimes, throwing myself into client projects with an intensity that my boss noticed and my coworkers whispered about. But I needed it. Needed to be useful, needed to be good at something, needed to prove to myself that I had value even if my family couldn't see it. And I was good, really good. I'd always been good with numbers, with patterns, with systems. It was the thing my mother had hated most about me, that analytical brain that asked uncomfortable questions and saw through her carefully constructed fictions. But in my work, it was everything. I could look at a company's financial infrastructure and see the inefficiencies immediately. Could build databases and automation systems that saved hundreds of hours of labor. Could take chaos and turn it into clean, elegant processes that actually worked. 6 months after the disownment, something shifted. I was working on a client project, building out a financial tracking system for a small business, and the owner asked if I did freelance work. She had a friend who needed something similar, and she'd be happy to refer me. I said yes without thinking. That weekend, I met with the friend, scoped out the project, quoted a rate that felt absurdly high to me but that she agreed to without hesitation. I did the work in 3 weeks, invoiced her. She paid immediately and asked if I'd be willing to consult on 2 more projects. Then she referred me to someone else. And suddenly, I had something I'd never had before. People who wanted to pay me for the skills my family had expected me to give away for free. I started taking more freelance projects. Nights and weekends at first, then cutting back my corporate hours to make room. My boss wasn't happy, but I'd stopped caring about making people happy who didn't respect me. The money added up faster than I expected. In 3 months of steady freelancing, I made almost as much as my annual salary. In 6 months, I made more. I went to Dr. Chen and told her I was thinking about quitting my corporate job and going out on my own. She asked me what I was afraid of. That my mother was right, I said. That I can't survive without them. That I'll fail and have to go back and admit she was right all along. Dr. Chen leaned forward in her chair. "Emma, you've been surviving without them for a year. You've been thriving. The question isn't whether you can do it. The question is whether you're ready to stop punishing yourself by staying small." I quit my job 2 weeks later. I filed an LLC on a Tuesday afternoon in September, sitting in a coffee shop with my laptop and a sense of vertigo so strong I thought I might throw up. The name took me hours to choose. I wanted something that meant something, that marked this as a threshold. Archway Capital Consulting. An arch is a passage, a doorway, a structure that holds weight by distributing it properly, that's stronger because of its shape, not in spite of it. I was walking through. I was building something that couldn't be taken from me, that couldn't be credited to someone else, that was mine in every legal and practical sense. The first year was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I worked from my apartment, met clients at coffee shops, kept my overhead low and my rates competitive. I got referrals, built a reputation, started turning down work because I had too much of it. I was good at this. Not because anyone gave me permission or told me I could be, but because I was actually, objectively, measurably good at it. By the end of year 1, I'd made 6 figures, by myself. No partner, no family business, no inheritance. Just me and my brain and the skills I'd spent years developing, while my family told me I was selfish for not using them to prop up David. I bought myself a good laptop, a professional wardrobe, moved to a better apartment, nothing fancy but mine, clean and quiet and full of light. I didn't tell my family. They didn't ask. The referral that changed everything came from a client I'd helped restructure their books. She knew someone, a woman named Dr. Lena Okonkwo, who ran a mid-sized investment firm and was looking for a consultant to overhaul their client management systems. I took the meeting mostly because the contract was substantial, 6 months of steady work at a rate that would let me hire my first employee if I wanted to. I didn't expect to like her. But Lena was different from anyone I'd worked with before. She was in her early 50s, a Nigerian-American former CFO who'd left corporate finance to start her own firm focused on ethical investing and women-owned businesses. She was brilliant and direct, and she didn't suffer fools, but she also had this way of seeing potential in people that reminded me of the mentor I'd never had. We met at her office downtown, all glass and steel and the kind of quiet good taste that comes from actual wealth, not the performance of it. She offered me coffee from a French press, asked me about my background, and actually listened when I answered. Then she showed me their systems, which were a mess. Multiple platforms that didn't talk to each other, data entry happening in 3 different places, no automation, no standardization. I could fix it, easily. But then Lena asked me a question that no client had ever asked before. What do you want to build, Emma? Not for me, for yourself. I stared at her. I don't understand. You're doing consulting work, trading hours for dollars. You're good at it, clearly, but it's not scalable. You can only work so many hours. She leaned back in her chair. What's the thing you wish existed? The system, the tool, the infrastructure? What do you want to build that would keep working even when you're not? I'd never thought about it that way before. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Lena had asked. What did I want to build? I thought about all the systems I'd created for clients. The databases, the automation, the processes. I built them over and over, customizing each one but using the same fundamental framework every time. I was building someone else a machine and getting paid once. What if I built it once and licensed it forever? The idea crystallized over the next few weeks as I worked on Lena's project. She and I had coffee every Friday to review progress, but the conversations always wandered into bigger territory. She told me about equity versus labor, about intellectual property, about the difference between being a service provider and being an owner. You're brilliant, she said one morning, matter of fact, but you're still thinking like someone who has to prove she deserves to take up space. You're undercharging, you're over-delivering, and you're doing it because somewhere inside you still believes you have to earn the right to exist. I felt like she'd reached into my chest and pulled out something I'd been hiding even from myself. My family, I started, then stopped. I know, Lena said gently. I can always tell. The ones who work like they're trying to outrun something. Like if they just achieve enough, produce enough, prove enough, someone will finally love them the way they needed to be loved. I couldn't speak. But here's what I learned, she continued. No amount of achievement fills that hole. You know what does? Building something that's yours, not to prove anything to anyone, just because you can, just because you're good at it and the world needs it and you deserve to profit from your own brilliance. She introduced me to her lawyer, helped me think through intellectual property strategy, taught me about software as a service, about licensing models, about productizing expertise. 6 months into the Lena project, I did something that scared me more than starting my first business. I took the client management system I'd built for Archway and turned it into a product. Standardized it, templated it, copyrighted it. Built a proper software interface with the help of a developer I hired on contract. Then I started licensing it, not custom building for each client. Licensing the same system over and over, with tiered pricing and support packages and annual renewals. The first month, 3 companies signed up. Small firms, nothing dramatic. The second month, 8. By month 6, I had 47 active licenses and monthly recurring revenue that exceeded what I'd made in my best consulting month. I hired my first real employee, Sam, a 24-year-old non-binary analyst who'd graduated top of their class with a finance degree and no connections, no family money, no safety net. They interviewed wearing a thrift store blazer and shoes that had been resoled twice, and when I asked them what they wanted to learn, they said everything, with such hungry intensity I saw myself at that age. I hired them on the spot. Together, we built ClearBridge Advisory, a second LLC, separate from Archway, focused entirely on the software side. Sam ran operations while I handled strategy and sales. We were a team of 2 building something that worked while we slept, that scaled without us having to scale our hours. By year 3 of being on my own, I had 2 companies, 4 employees, and consistent low 6-figure monthly revenue. I bought a condo. Small, just 1 bedroom, but in a good neighborhood with big windows and a doorman and underground parking. The mortgage application asked for employment verification. I put down self-employed and attached my business tax returns. The loan officer called me, confused. These are business returns for 2 separate entities. We need your personal income verification. Those are mine, I said. I own both companies. There was a pause. Oh, yes, this is more than sufficient. Congratulations, Miss Sterling. The day I got the keys, I sat on the floor of my empty condo and cried. Not sad tears, not happy ones exactly either. Relief, maybe, or disbelief. I'd done it without them, in spite of them. I'd survived, more than survived. And I was just getting started. Lena taught me something that changed everything. Wealth isn't just about how much money you make. It's about structure, infrastructure, systems that protect you, that work for you, that can't be taken away. By the end of year 3, ClearBridge had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. The software wasn't just being used by a handful of small firms anymore. We had over 200 active licenses, from boutique consultancies to mid-sized accounting practices to a few larger corporations who'd heard about us through word of mouth. Sam had hired 2 junior developers, and we'd moved into actual office space. Nothing fancy but real, with a conference room and a kitchen and our logo on the door. Archway was evolving too. I'd stopped taking small clients, the kind of work I'd started with. Instead, I was consulting for mid-sized companies, nonprofits with complex funding structures, and increasingly, family offices. Wealthy families who needed someone to help them think strategically about their money, their investments, their legacy planning. I learned about trusts and estate planning, about tax optimization and asset protection, about the difference between being rich and being wealthy, which mostly came down to whether your money worked for you or you worked for your money. And I started thinking about my own wealth differently. I'd been so focused on revenue, on growth, on proving I could make it, that I hadn't really stopped to look at what I'd built. But when my accountant sat me down for year-end, planning at the end of year 3, she pulled up a balance sheet that made me go quiet. Between the equity in both businesses, my real estate holdings, investment accounts, and liquid assets, I was worth just over $8 million. $8 million. I'd gone from disowned and disposable to a net worth that would have seemed like a fantasy 5 years ago. My accountant, Rebecca, a sharp woman in her 60s who ran her own firm and took no nonsense from anyone, looked at me over her reading glasses. "You need better structure," she said. "Right now everything's in your personal name or split between 2 LLCs. You need asset protection, estate planning. You need a family office." "I don't have a family," I said automatically. She smiled. "Then you get to build one on your terms." It took me 3 months to set it up properly. I worked with Rebecca and a lawyer Lena recommended, a woman named Joyce who specialized in wealth management and business succession. Together, We created Sterling Family Office. The name felt audacious. Who was I to have a family office? Those were for dynasties, for old money, for people whose last names were on buildings. But Joyce explained it differently. A family office is just infrastructure for managing significant assets. It can be for a traditional family, sure, but it can also be for you and the people and causes you choose to invest in. It's your family. You define it. Sterling Family Office became the umbrella. The entity that held my stake in Archway and Clearbridge, that managed my investment portfolio, that handled my real estate holdings. We set up trusts for asset protection, established protocols for decision-making, created systems that would outlast me. I hired a COO, Marcus, a former McKinsey consultant who was tired of making rich people richer and wanted to build something that mattered. He came on to manage operations across all three entities, to think strategically about growth, to handle the business operations side while I focused on vision and client relationships. I brought on a dedicated legal advisor, a CPA I trusted completely, not my father's firm, never my father's firm, but Rebecca's practice, woman-owned and fiercely competent. And I started angel investing. Women-led startups, mostly. First-generation founders. People who reminded me of myself, brilliant and hungry, and building something from nothing with no safety net and no family money to fall back on. I put $500,000 into a fintech startup run by 2 immigrant women, $250,000 into an educational platform for low-income students, smaller amounts, $25,000 or $50,000, into a dozen other ventures. Some would fail, that was fine. Some would succeed, and I'd be part of making that happen. I was building the family I wanted. Not blood, not obligation, but chosen, intentional people who showed up. When I turned 32, I bought a second property. A small lake house 2 hours north of the city, nothing ostentatious but beautifully maintained, with a dock and enough bedrooms for guests and a kitchen that looked out over the water. I'd never had a place to rest before. Never had somewhere I could go just to be quiet, to think, to exist without performing or producing or proving. The lake house became that. Lena came up for a weekend that first summer. We sat on the dock with our feet in the water, glasses of wine in hand, and she looked at me with something like pride. "You did it," she said. "Did what?" "Built a life, not just a business, a life. That's rarer than you think." I didn't tell her that sometimes I still woke up waiting for it all to disappear. That some part of me still expected someone to show up and tell me I didn't deserve any of this, that I'd made some terrible mistake and it was all going to be taken away. But I was learning to live with that voice, to acknowledge it and keep building anyway. That fall, I got a call from a business journalist. The regional magazine was doing a feature on entrepreneurs under 35, and I'd been nominated by someone. She wouldn't say who, but I suspected Lena. I almost said no. I'd spent so long trying to be invisible, trying not to take up too much space, that the idea of being publicly visible felt dangerous. But then I thought about the young women who might read it. The ones like I'd been, told they were too much or not enough, trying to figure out if there was a path forward. I said yes. The interview took 2 hours. We talked about Archway and Clearbridge, about the path from corporate work to entrepreneurship, about the challenges of scaling, about what I'd learned. She asked if I came from a business family. "No," I said simply. "I built this on my own." The article came out in November. 30 under 30, the consultant who became a capitalist. There was a photo of me in the office, professional and composed. 3 pages about the businesses, the growth trajectory, the angel investing. My mother's friends saw it. I know because my inbox got a sudden flood of LinkedIn requests from people with her last name, people I'd grown up calling aunt and uncle and cousin, people who'd gone silent when I was erased from the family narrative. I ignored every single one. A week later, my assistant Jennifer told me someone named Carol had called the office, claiming to be my aunt, asking for my personal number. "I told her we don't give out personal contact information," Jennifer said. "Was that right?" That was perfect, I said. I didn't hear from my immediate family. Not yet. But I knew they'd seen it. In a town this size, with my mother's network of church friends and book club members and PTA connections from when David and I were kids, there was no way it hadn't gotten back to her. I wondered what she'd thought, seeing my face in a magazine, reading about the businesses I'd built, the success I'd achieved. I wondered if she still thought I'd come crawling back. The first real contact came about 6 months after the article, almost 4 years after the disownment. I was at the office, in a planning meeting with Marcus and Sam, when my phone buzzed with a Facebook message notification. I almost ignored it, but something made me glance at the screen. It was from my Aunt Linda, my father's sister. "Emma, sweetheart, we miss you at Thanksgiving. It's not the same without you." I stared at the message for a long time. I'd never missed Thanksgiving. They'd uninvited me, erased me, acted like I'd never existed. And now we miss you. I showed it to Dr. Chen that Thursday. "What do you want to do with this?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "I don't want to do anything with it." "Then don't." I didn't respond to Linda. 2 weeks later, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years sent me a friend request with a message. "Hey, stranger, your mom asks about you sometimes. We should catch up." My mom asks about you. As if she hadn't been the one to cut me off. As if this was just a casual drift and not a deliberate severing. I declined the request. Then, in early spring, a package arrived at my condo. My address, which I'd never given to anyone in my family. Someone had found it somehow. Inside was a baby announcement. David and his wife had a son. The card had a professional photo, the kind you get done at a studio, and a pre-printed message about the joy of new life. Someone had handwritten at the bottom, "David wanted you to know you're an aunt." I sat with that for a while, looked at the photo of the baby, this tiny human I was connected to by biology, but nothing else. This child who would grow up hearing stories about his family, and I probably wouldn't be in them. Or if I was, I'd be the difficult aunt who'd abandoned everyone, the narrative already written. I ordered a $75 gift card from a baby store and had it mailed to their address with a generic card. "Congratulations. Best wishes, Emma." No return address, no phone number, nothing that invited further contact. I heard nothing back. Summer came. I traveled to 3 conferences, gave 2 keynote speeches, closed 4 major consulting contracts. Sterling was managing over $150 million in assets now, between my own holdings and the investments I was making as an LP in other funds. I hired Jennifer, my first dedicated executive assistant, whose job was partly administrative and partly to be a human firewall between me and anything that might destabilize the peace I'd built. And then one Tuesday in August, Jennifer knocked on my office door. "Someone named David called," she said. "He said he's your brother and it's important. I didn't put him through. Do you want the number?" My stomach dropped. "No," I said. "Just take a message if he calls again." He called again that afternoon. Jennifer took a voicemail and forwarded it to my phone. I listened to it on my drive home. His voice was strained, awkward. "Emma, it's David. I know it's been a while. Mom said I should try to reach you. We need to talk. It's about the firm. I'm not sure if you've heard, but things have been difficult lately and we could really use your expertise. Maybe we could grab coffee or something when you're in town. Anyway, call me back, please. We could really use your expertise." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I should have defended you." Not, "I've thought about that dinner every day for 4 years and I know what I did was wrong." Just, "We need something from you." I deleted the voicemail. But something nagged at me. The firm was in trouble. How much trouble? I called Rebecca, my accountant. "Hypothetically," I said, "if I wanted to know the financial status of a small accounting firm, how would I go about that?" She was quiet for a moment. "Is this about your family?" "Maybe." "I can make some calls," she said. "I know people who know people. Give me a few days." A week later, Rebecca came to my office and closed the door behind her. Your family's firm is in serious trouble, she said without preamble. IRS issues, major client losses, cash flow problems. Word is they're maybe 3 months from insolvency. How bad? Bad enough that they're probably going to lose everything. The business, potentially personal assets if there's any commingling of funds, which there usually is with these small family operations. She paused. Emma, they're going to come after you harder. You know that, right? You're successful now, visible. They're going to frame this as family helping family. I know, I said. What are you going to do? Nothing, I said. Absolutely nothing. Rebecca smiled. Good. But they didn't stop. David called 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. I didn't answer. Jennifer took messages that got progressively more desperate. Then my mother called. I knew it was her before I even listened to the voicemail. Jennifer's message just said, Patricia Sterling said she's your mother, sounded upset. I waited until I got home, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat on my couch before I played it. Her voice was different than I remembered. Higher, sweeter, performing warmth in a way that made my skin crawl. Emma, sweetheart, I don't know why you're being so cold. We're family. David really needs your help with the firm, and I just don't understand why you won't even call him back. I know you've done so well for yourself. There it was, the acknowledgement, the tiniest admission that I'd succeeded. And we're so proud of you, honey. But family helps family. That's what we do. Please call me back. I love you. I love you. 3 words she'd never said easily. 3 words that felt like a weapon now, deployed because she needed something. I didn't call back. 2 days later, my father left a message. His voice was gruff, uncomfortable, guilty. Emma, it's Dad. Look, I know things ended badly, but your mother's health isn't great. The stress of the business situation is really affecting her. High blood pressure, anxiety. She's not sleeping. I just think. I hope you can find it in your heart to at least talk to David. He's in over his head and he knows it. We all make mistakes. I hope you can live with yourself if something happens to your mother over this. I played that message 3 times, feeling something cold settle in my chest. The stress of the business is affecting her. I hope you can live with yourself. The business that was failing because David couldn't maintain the systems I'd built, couldn't run the practice he'd been handed, couldn't do the work he'd taken credit for. And somehow that was my fault, my responsibility, my burden. The manipulation was so transparent, it would have been funny if it hadn't made me want to put my fist through a wall. I called Dr. Chen, got an emergency appointment. They're blaming me for my mother's health, I said, because I won't fix the mess David made with the business I built for free and got no credit for. Of course they are, Dr. Chen said calmly. What else would they do? Taking actual responsibility. That would require them to acknowledge that their entire narrative about you was a lie. I feel crazy. You're not crazy. You're being gaslit by people who are desperate and who have always used guilt as a control mechanism. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Nothing, I said. I'm going to do nothing. Good, she said. Nothing is the right answer. But the final message came a week later. A letter arrived at my business address. Handwritten envelope, my mother's perfect cursive. Inside was a check for $50,000, made out to me, and a handwritten note on her monogrammed stationery. Emma, I know we've had our differences. I know I haven't always understood you, and maybe I haven't always said the right things. But you're my daughter, and I love you. This is from your father's retirement account. We want you to have it. Please deposit this and come home. We need you. David needs you. You'll always be our daughter, no matter what. Please, Mom. I sat at my desk and stared at that check for a long time. $50,000. 5 years ago, it would have been life-changing, would have paid off my student loans, would have been a down payment on a house. Now it was less than I made in a month, less than I'd made on a single consulting contract last quarter. It wasn't a gift, it was a bribe or a test or both. See, we're sacrificing for you. We're giving you money. Now you owe us. I took my phone and photographed the check and the letter, saved them to a folder. Documentation, just in case. Then I took a red pen and wrote void across the check in large letters. I drafted a response on my business letterhead. Short, professional, boundaried. Patricia, I'm returning this check uncashed. I'm not able to help with the firm's situation. I wish you all the best in resolving it, but I need you to understand that I'm not available for this. Please do not contact me again. Emma Sterling. Not love, Emma, not your daughter. Just my name. I mailed it that afternoon, certified mail, return receipt requested. A paper trail, proof that I'd said no, proof that I'd set a boundary. Because I knew this wasn't over. People like my mother didn't give up when they needed something. They just escalated. The invitation came in late September. Heavy cardstock, embossed logo, the kind of invitation that signaled this wasn't just another conference. The State Business Council's annual gala, black tie, 500 attendees, celebrating innovation and entrepreneurship across the region. They wanted me to be the keynote speaker. And they were giving me an award, Innovator of the Year. The speaking fee was $25,000, plus travel and accommodation, though I was local so I'd be driving. But it was never really about the money anymore. It was about the platform, the visibility, the fact that people wanted to hear what I had to say. 10 years ago, I'd been a college student whose mother barely acknowledged her scholarship. 5 years ago, I'd been disowned at a dinner table for asking for credit for my own work. Now I was keynoting a gala with the governor's economic advisor. I said yes immediately. Marcus helped me prep. We went through my talking points, refined the presentation, made sure every slide was perfect. The theme they'd given me was broad enough to work with, building sustainable infrastructure in uncertain times. I could work with that. I bought a gown for the occasion. Deep navy, elegant, custom-tailored to fit perfectly. The kind of dress that cost more than my first car, but that made me feel like the person I'd become, not the person I'd been. The gala was on a Saturday in early November. I spent the afternoon getting ready, hair and makeup professionally done, trying not to think about the fact that I was about to walk into a room of 500 people and talk about my work, my success, my journey. Trying not to think about the girl who used to make herself smaller at family dinners so she wouldn't get accused of showing off. The venue was downtown, a historic hotel with a ballroom that dripped chandeliers and old money. I arrived during cocktail hour, was immediately intercepted by the event coordinator who walked me through the evening's schedule. Cocktails until 7, dinner at 7:30, awards and keynote at 8:45. I was seated at the head table, with the governor's economic advisor, with 2 CEOs whose companies I'd admired from a distance for years, with the president of the business council and a philanthropist who'd endowed half the arts programs in the city. It felt surreal. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and made my way into the cocktail reception, already scanning the room for Lena, who'd said she'd be here. And that's when I heard it. A voice I hadn't heard in almost 5 years, except through voicemails I deleted. My mother's voice. I turned, champagne glass frozen halfway to my lips. They were standing near the bar, all 3 of them, Patricia, Richard, and David. My mother in a dress I recognized from years ago, probably the same one she wore to church on Easter. My father in an ill-fitting suit, looking uncomfortable. David in something slightly better but still obviously off the rack, trying too hard. They weren't at the head table. They were at a table near the back, the kind you got when you bought the cheapest sponsorship tier just to get in the door, just to say you were there, hopping to network your way into better contracts. Patricia saw me first. I watched her face go through a sequence of expressions in about 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, shock, and then something that looked almost like fear before she plastered on a smile. She started walking toward me. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, to leave, to get out before she could corner me, could make a scene, could ruin this night I'd earned. But I didn't run. I'd spent too many years running from her, from their judgment, from the feeling that I wasn't enough. I'd built too much, Survived too much, become too much to run now. I stood still and waited. She approached with her arms slightly open, performing warmth for the strangers around us, her voice too loud and too bright. "Emma, sweetheart, what a surprise." I kept my voice level, my face neutral, professional. "Hello, Patricia." Not mom, not mother. "Patricia." I watched her register it, saw the microscopic flinch. David appeared at her shoulder, my father trailing behind. David tried for casual and landed somewhere near desperate. "We didn't know you'd be here. This is. Wow, you look great. This is quite the event." My father said nothing, looked at the floor, at his shoes, at the chandelier, anywhere but at me. Patricia's smile was straining now, the performance getting harder to maintain. "We've been trying to reach you, honey. I don't know why you've been ignoring us. We got your letter, but I think maybe you misunderstood. We just want to talk. Family is family, Emma." A small crowd was forming around us. Not obviously, but people were slowing down, drinks in hand, sensing something happening. Drama has gravity. I kept my voice quiet, calm, but clear enough that anyone listening could hear every word. "You told me I wasn't part of the family," I said. "I took you at your word." Patricia's face flushed. "You're being ridiculous. That was years ago. You're holding a grudge over one argument. We need your help and you're too proud to even." The microphone crackled. The event coordinator's voice filled the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you could begin making your way to your tables, we'll be starting dinner service shortly." Saved by the announcement. I excused myself, turned, and walked toward the head table without looking back. I could feel Patricia's eyes on me, could hear her trying to follow, voice rising slightly, but security, subtle and professional, the kind that works these events, gently redirected her toward the back of the room. I took my seat between the economic advisor and one of the CEOs. My hands were shaking. I hid them in my lap. The CEO, a woman in her 60s named Margaret who ran a manufacturing company, leaned over. "Are you all right?" "Yes," I said, "just someone I used to know." She nodded, didn't press, and I was grateful. Dinner was served. I barely tasted it. I made conversation, smiled at appropriate times, laughed when people made jokes. On the outside, I was composed, professional, the keynote speaker who had her life together. On the inside, I was 17 again, sitting at my mother's table, being told I thought too much of myself. But I wasn't 17. I was 34, and I was sitting at the head table, not the back. The awards started at 8:30. There were 3 before mine. Business of the Year, Community Impact Award, Emerging Leader. And then, the president of the Business Council took the microphone. "Our final award tonight is one I'm particularly excited about. The Innovator of the Year Award recognizes an individual who has not only built a successful enterprise, but has fundamentally changed how we think about their industry. This year's recipient started with nothing but expertise and determination. She built not 1 but 3 successful entities. Her software serves over 200 firms across the region. Her consultancy has worked with some of our most respected organizations, and her family office is setting a new standard for ethical investment and wealth management. Please join me in welcoming Emma Sterling." The room erupted in applause. I stood, walked to the stage, accepted the award, a glass sculpture that caught the light and threw rainbows. And then I gave my speech. I didn't talk about my family, didn't mention the disownment or the years of being underestimated or the dinner table where I was told I'd never survive without them. I didn't have to. I talked about resilience, about building systems that can't be taken from you, about the difference between being given power and taking it, about what it means to be underestimated and how to turn that into fuel instead of letting it become a cage. I talked about ownership, about intellectual property and equity, and the importance of knowing your worth and documenting your work and never, ever giving away your expertise to people who won't value it. I talked about chosen family, about mentors and partners and the people who show up, who invest in you, who celebrate your success instead of resenting it. The audience was silent, listening. I could see Lena in the crowd, smiling. Marcus giving me a thumbs up. Sam recording on their phone, probably already planning to clip this for our social media. And I could see my family at their table in the back. David starring. My father looking at his plate. Patricia crying, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry tears, humiliated tears, the tears of someone who's realized they're watching their own narrative collapse in real time. I finished the speech. The room stood. A standing ovation that went on for what felt like forever. I walked off the stage, was immediately surrounded by people wanting to talk, to shake my hand, to ask for my card. The event coordinator whisked me away for photos. The journalist who'd interviewed me for the magazine article found me and asked if I'd be willing to do a follow-up feature. I said yes to all of it. And when I finally made it out of the ballroom an hour later, when my driver pulled up and I slid into the back seat, only then did I let myself shake. Only then did I let myself feel it. Not triumph, exactly. Something more complicated than that. Vindication, grief, relief, the strange, bittersweet ache of winning a game you never wanted to play. I cried in the car. Not sobs, just quiet tears that I wiped away before they could ruin my makeup. And then I went home. The next morning, I woke up to 73 LinkedIn notifications. Messages from people who'd been at the gala, congratulating me, asking for consultations, praising the speech. 3 requests for podcast interviews, an invitation to speak at a women's finance conference in Singapore. And 1 email from a journalist at a major business publication, asking if I'd be interested in being profiled for a feature on self-made women in finance. I responded to that one first. Yes, I'd be interested. I was at the office by 9, coffee in hand, ready to process the week's contracts when Jennifer knocked on my door. "Something you should see," she said, and her tone told me I wasn't going to like it. She handed me her phone, an email forwarded from one of our clients. It was from David, using his firm's email address, referencing the gala, claiming he'd reconnected with his sister Emma Sterling, and would love to discuss how their firms might collaborate to serve the client's needs. I read it twice. The audacity was almost impressive. "The client forwarded this to us asking if you wanted them to take the meeting," Jennifer said. "They seemed confused since you've never mentioned a brother." I typed out a response on Jennifer's phone, professional and clear. "Thank you for checking with us. I have no professional or personal relationship with that firm. Please use your discretion, but I wanted you to be aware that any claim of connection or collaboration is inaccurate. Best, Emma." I sent it, handed Jennifer back her phone. "Do we need to do anything else?" she asked. "Send a note to all our active clients," I said. "Just a brief heads up that someone is using my name without authorization to solicit business, and to please verify any outreach that claims a connection to me or Sterling. Professional but clear." "On it," Jennifer said. An hour later, she was back. "Your mother called the office." "Of course she did." "What did she say?" "That she needed to speak with you urgently, that it was a family emergency, that you'd know what it was about." Jennifer paused. "I told her we don't forward personal calls and ended the conversation." "Thank you." "There's more. She called back from a different number. I didn't answer. And then someone named David called claiming there was a legal issue that required your immediate attention." My stomach tightened. "Legal issue." I told him to have his attorney contact ours in writing. He hung up. I closed my eyes, took a breath. Block all the numbers. If anyone claiming to be family calls, the answer is the same. They can put any legitimate business in writing to our legal counsel. "Already done," Jennifer said. "Do you want me to loop in Joyce?" "Joyce, my attorney." "Yes," I said. "Let her know what's happening. Ask her what our options are if this continues." Jennifer nodded and left. I sat at my desk and tried to focus on work, but my hands were shaking again. They weren't going to stop. They were desperate, and desperate people escalated. Joyce called me that afternoon. "I've reviewed the situation," she said. Right now, they're just being annoying. But if they continue trying to use your name for business solicitation or if they start making threats, we can pursue a cease and desist. If it goes beyond that, we can look at restraining orders, though that's a bigger step. I don't want to go to war, I said. I just want them to leave me alone. Then we wait, Joyce said. We document everything. We maintain boundaries, and if they cross a line, we respond proportionately. That night, I got an email from Patricia's personal address, the one I'd forgotten to block because she'd never used email much. The subject line, "How could you?" I almost deleted it without reading. Should have. But I opened it. It was long, unhinged, accusing me of humiliating the family in public, of ruining David's chance to network at the gala, of being vindictive and cruel and selfish. It said I'd always been difficult, always needed to be the center of attention, always put myself above family. It said I was the reason the business was failing, because I'd refused to help. That my mother's health was deteriorating from stress, and if anything happened to her, it would be my fault. It ended with, "I don't know what happened to you. You used to be such a sweet girl. Success has made you heartless." I read it once. Then I forwarded it to Dr. Chen and to Joyce with a note, "For documentation, not responding." Joyce replied within minutes, "Good, don't respond, save everything." Dr. Chen's response came an hour later. "This is what desperation looks like. Remember, you didn't cause their problems. You're just refusing to fix them. That's not cruelty. That's boundaries." I printed the email, put it in a folder, added it to the documentation I'd been keeping. And then I did something I'd been thinking about for weeks. I called Marcus into my office. "I want to create a scholarship fund," I said, "through Sterling, for first-generation college students studying finance or business. Preference for students who have been estranged from family or who don't have family financial support." Marcus smiled. "I think that's an excellent use of resources. How much are you thinking?" "Start with $250,000, I said. "Enough for 5 full scholarships the first year. We can reassess annually." "I'll draft a proposal," he said. The scholarship fund launched in January. We partnered with 3 state universities, set clear criteria, put together a selection committee. The first recipient was a young woman named Ashley, 20 years old, studying accounting, estranged from her family after she came out as gay. She was working 2 jobs to pay tuition and living in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates. I met her for coffee in March at a cafe near her campus. She was nervous, hands wrapped around her cup like she needed the warmth, eyes wide and disbelieving. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "This scholarship, it's literally changing my life. I can cut back to 1 job. I can actually focus on school. I can breathe." "You don't have to thank me," I said. "Just do the work, build something good, and when you're where I am someday, help someone else." "Did you," she hesitated. "The scholarship criteria, the family estrangement part, is that?" "Yes," I said simply. "I know what it's like." Her eyes filled with tears. "Does it get better?" I thought about that. About the gala, the speech, the standing ovation. About the empire I'd built and the peace I'd found. About the fact that I still sometimes woke up feeling like I was 17 and not enough. "Yes," I said. "It gets better. Not easier, exactly. You still carry it. But you learn to build a life that's yours. You learn that family isn't always blood. And you learn that the people who couldn't see your worth, that's their failure, not yours." She nodded, wiped her eyes. "Build your own family," I said. "That's the secret. Find your people, the ones who show up, and let go of the ones who never will." We talked for another hour. About her classes, her career goals, her dreams. When we parted ways, she hugged me, fierce and grateful. I drove back to my office and felt something settle in my chest. This was what I wanted to build with my wealth. Not hoarding it, not proving anything. Just using what I had to make sure someone else didn't have to hurt the way I'd hurt. The lake house in June was exactly what I needed. I'd invited Lena, Marcus, and Sam for a long weekend. My chosen family, the people who'd shown up, who'd invested in me, who'd helped me build this strange and beautiful life. We spent Friday evening on the deck, grilling vegetables and fish, drinking wine, watching the sunset paint the sky pink and gold. Lena raised her glass in a toast. To Emma, she said, who bet on herself when no one else would. To Emma, Marcus and Sam echoed. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. To all of us, I said, I didn't do this alone. We ate and talked and laughed, the conversation wandering from business strategy to Sam's terrible dating app stories to Marcus's obsession with sourdough bread to Lena's upcoming trip to Lagos. At some point, Lena asked the question I'd been waiting for. Do you ever hear from them, your family? No, I said. Not since I had my lawyer send a formal cease and desist 6 months ago. They stopped. How do you feel about that? I thought about it, really thought. Okay, I said finally. I'm okay with it. I used to think I'd feel triumphant, like I'd imagine the moment they realized how wrong they were and how much I'd achieved without them. But it's not like that. I just feel peaceful, like I finally stopped trying to win a game that was rigged from the start. Lena nodded. That's wisdom. I still grieve sometimes, I admitted. Not for them exactly, for the family I deserved and didn't get, for the version of my childhood where my mother was proud of me instead of threatened by me. But I'm not waiting anymore, not hoping they'll change. I've just moved on. Sam leaned forward. Can I ask what you learned? Like if you could go back and tell your younger self something, what would it be? I smiled, took a sip of wine, thought about that question. I'd tell her that you can't earn love from people who have decided you're unworthy, that she should stop trying and start building. I'd tell her that documentation is everything, that ownership matters, that contracts and intellectual property and paper trails, all of that boring procedural stuff, that's actually power. It's the difference between having leverage and just performing labor. I paused. I'd tell her that no is a complete sentence, that she doesn't owe anyone access to the life she built after they tried to destroy her. And I'd tell her that family is about who shows up, not about biology. That blood is just blood, that she gets to choose her family, and that's not selfish, it's survival. Marcus raised his glass. Damn right. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light fade on the water. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I walked down to the dock alone, poured myself one more glass of wine, and sat with my feet dangling over the edge, looking at the stars reflected in the dark water. 5 years ago, I'd sat in my apartment in the dark, waiting to cry, trying to understand how wanting credit for my own work made me the villain. Now I was here, at a lake house I owned, with a business empire I'd built, with people who loved me sleeping in the guest rooms. I thought about the airline agent's question, which family entity is covering your flight? I thought about my mother's voice, you'll never survive without us. And I smiled. I'd done more than survive. I'd built something she couldn't take away, couldn't narrate away, couldn't give to my brother instead. I'd built a life that was mine. The wind picked up, rippling the water. Somewhere across the lake, I could hear music from another house, laughter carrying across the dark. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app where I sometimes drafted thoughts for speeches or articles. I started typing. If you've ever been told you're nothing without someone who treated you like nothing, I need you to hear this. They were wrong. You're not nothing. You're everything. And you don't need their validation to prove it. You just need to stop giving away your power to people who will never value it. Stop making yourself small for people who want you to disappear. Stop working for free for people who should be paying you. Stop hopping that if you just achieve enough, prove enough, give enough, they'll finally see your worth. They won't, and that's their loss, not yours. Here's what I learned: document everything. Own your work. Build systems that can't be taken from you. Read every contract. Know your worth and charge it. Say no without explaining yourself. Build boundaries and defend them. And find your people, the ones who show up, the ones who invest in you and celebrate you and push you to grow, the ones who see your brilliance and aren't threatened by it. That's your family. Not the people who share your blood, the people who show up. I spent years trying to earn love from people who decided I wasn't worthy. The day I stopped trying was the day I started building. And I built something beautiful, something mine, something they can't touch. You can too. Wherever you are right now, whatever you're walking away from or walking toward, you're not alone. None of us are. We're out here building families of choice, creating lives that are ours, refusing to shrink. And we're cheering for you. I posted it as a note on my personal social media, something I rarely used, but that felt right for this. Within minutes, comments started appearing. Stories from people who'd been estranged, who'd left toxic families, who were building their own lives from scratch. I read through them, these strangers who weren't strangers at all, who knew exactly what it felt like to be both free and grieving, vindicated and sad, powerful and still healing. Someone commented, "Where are you? I'm listening from Ohio and I needed to hear this tonight." I smiled and typed back, "At my lake house, and I'm so glad it reached you." The comments kept coming. People sharing their locations, their stories, their own moments of walking away and building something new. This was the family I'd built. Not bound by obligation or biology or guilt. Bound by shared experience, by showing up, by choosing each other again and again. I finished my wine, looked out at the water one more time. Tomorrow I'd wake up and make breakfast for my people. We'd take the kayaks out, sit in the sun, talk about business and life and everything in between. Next week I'd fly to Singapore for that conference. Next month, London. I had a scholarship recipient starting her sophomore year who sent me updates about her classes. I had 3 companies that were mine. I had a network of women I'd invested in, invested with, built alongside. I had a life I'd fought for. And I had peace. Not the absence of pain. Peace doesn't work that way. But the presence of boundaries, of agency, of choice. The presence of a self I'd built instead of the one they'd tried to force me into. I wasn't thinking about my mother anymore. Wasn't wondering if she regretted what she'd said, if she'd seen my success and felt anything other than resentment. I was thinking about Ashley, the scholarship recipient, and whether she'd figured out that accounting problem she'd texted me about. I was thinking about the new hire starting Monday, another first-gen student who reminded me of Sam. I was thinking about my keynote in London and the women who'd be in the audience, maybe hearing for the first time that they could build something that was theirs. The stars were bright tonight, no light pollution this far from the city, just vast, endless sky. I'd built something vast too. Not just businesses, not just wealth. A life that was mine, a family I'd chosen, a self I'd fought for and won. And that was enough. That was everything. I stood, picked up my empty wine glass, and walked back up to the house where my people were sleeping, where tomorrow we'd wake up and keep building, keep choosing each other, keep showing up. I was home. Not the home I was born into. The home I'd built. And no one could ever take that away.